A common misconception about me is that I hate Helluva Boss. I don't. I was a full supporter of Helluva Boss throughout its first season, and it just so happened that I made this channel in between the seasons, and the circus was one of the only episodes I outright disliked at the time, so I made a video on it. Then the rest of season 2 happened, where the show I once enjoyed had descended in quality so much I had forgotten what it was like to watch a good episode of this show. And I don't mean good like kind of good or not bad, I mean good enough to make me excited to rewatch the episode over and over again. And then this episode came out and I was reminded what that felt like. I'm going to do a quick summary of what happens in this episode, so if you want to go straight to the review, skip to the time displayed on screen. The episode begins with Blitz, breaking into a hospital looking for his sister Barbie. He finds out that she has been checked out of the hospital recently and now has a job. Meanwhile at the IMP office, Moxie and Millie have a customer, with the unusual circumstance of not knowing who killed him. This prompts Moxie to ask Blitz what they should do, but Blitz could care less since he is focused on looking for his sister, and tells Moxie to figure it out on his own. Moxie is ecstatic to be in charge of a job for once and is dead set on making it successful to prove how capable he is. Moxie and Millie go to the human world and Moxie's plan is to do detective work while disguised as humans to deduce who the killer is at the summer camp their client died at. Moxie's attempts at gaining the campers' trust goes horribly, but Millie is a sensation and becomes a celebrity among the campers. Moxie handles this pretty poorly, and over the course of a week he succumbs to outbursts of jealousy as nothing is going the way he planned. Eventually Millie gets so popular that she's going to do a performance for the local news, which pushes Moxie past his breaking point, and for the first time in the series, Moxie and Millie get into an argument. Right before Millie is going to perform, Moxie praises her, making up for his outburst, and notices a pair of people sneaking away from the performance. He begins to track them down and runs into Blitz, and together they encounter the client's killer, who is accompanied by Barbie. The killer is apparently Barbie's drug dealer who killed the client when he found out about their operation. Moxie tries to kill the client, but Barbie does her best to stop him while Blitz makes sure that Barbie isn't hurt by Moxie. After an 80s style fighting montage, eventually a firework goes off and kills the counselor. Barbie is infuriated, and despite Blitz's genuine attempts at trying to repair his relationship with his sister, she leaves, telling Blitz she doesn't want to ever see him again. Moxie and Millie celebrate the success of the mission by committing a not safe for YouTube act on stage in front of the entire camp, and return to the office where the episode ends with Blitz giving Moxie false hope of being proud of him, only to call him a disappointment seconds later. Okay, this episode has more of a focus on the characters rather than the events surrounding them, so we are going to spend a bit of time discussing them. Starting with Blitz. Just like in X's and Oo's, Blitz takes a back seat in this episode and isn't in it that much, but unlike Western Energy, he isn't an overly vulgar distracting presence that detracts from the episode. He spends most of his screen time looking for his sister, and throughout his search he gets so little screen time that it feels like a stretch to even call it a B-plot. If you cut out the 2 scenes he's in between the beginning and the end of the episode, almost nothing would be different. His search for his sister isn't really that interesting, and when he actually finds her, it's not as climactic of a moment as you would think. We do get a moment where we see a softer side of him for the first time though, where he genuinely tries to win over someone who hates him. What makes this scene so effective is unlike most of his scenes with Luna, there is no feeling of comedy to it. You can almost feel the delicacy of the situation and the tension in the air, making this quick interaction before Barbie leaves leave a gentle emotional impact that may not have been intense enough to make it linger on your mind, but in that moment I was 100% immersed in the show and the characters. Bravo to the voice actors and anyone who contributed to making this scene work the way it did. As for Barbie, she gets the worst possible introduction I think we have seen in the show. Not only is there no gravitas to her reveal, she is also introduced in the middle of a conflict with the person she hates the most intertwined. The reason why this doesn't work is from the moment we see her, she's set in a bad mood, so we only get to see the worst side of her, and there is no chance of seeing any other side to her because a conflict ensues immediately afterward, leaving no breathing room between when she's introduced and when she leaves. Moments like this make it pretty easy to tell there are only a few writers on this show, because by having almost all of Barbie's interactions be with Blitz, just like Millie is to Moxie and Stella is to Stolas, she feels like an accessory to Blitz who only exists to give him development instead of feeling like an individual character. If someone were to ask me what this character is like, all I could say is that she's a drug addict who hates her brother and likes to flash kids. This problem could have been remedied if throughout the episode, when she was in her human disguise, she interacted with Moxie and Millie a handful of times, giving the audience a chance to get to know her a little better and develop her character. It also would have been a pretty cool plot twist to reveal that she was Barbie the whole time. The only aspect of this character that is somewhat interesting is that she might be attracted to Moxie, which is a really strange character trait to give her, but it's better than nothing, I guess. We get to see Moxie in a whole new light in this episode. He's narcissistic, jealous, completely obsessive, and when he's roleplaying as Maxine, pretty annoying, even though I'm sure that was the point. I know that some people feel like these are uncharacteristic traits for this character, and they are, but there is a reason for that. The fanbase can't praise Luna for being vulnerable in Queen Bee because she's in an uncomfortable position, and then hate the way Moxie acts when he's put in a desperate position. This is the first time in Moxie's eyes that Blitz has put any faith in him, and Moxie sees this as a chance to prove his capability to Blitz. And as a result, becomes obsessed with pulling off this job perfectly, and when an obsessive person's plan doesn't go as planned, usually the worst personality traits in that person are emphasized. Moxie has had an inferiority complex from the very beginning of the show, and you know what trait grows from an inferiority complex? Jealousy. The way Moxie acts in this episode is in tune with his established personality, except this is the first time we get to see him slowly break down throughout the episode, and takes it out on the only person he knows who is in the position he wants to be in. The fanbase has been discussing the problem with Millie's character for a very long time, and for the first time since the Harvest Moon Festival, she has been developed in a meaningful way that will satiate the thirst for the Millie fans that have waited way too long for it to be quenched. In regards to her relationship with Moxie, this episode really just goes the extra mile to show what an amazing and patient wife she is, but even though this episode still puts a large focus on Moxie and delegates Millie to being a supporting role again, she steals this episode from him, making up for it. I can't say there are any particular scenes where she truly stands out, but the exploration of her insecurity of feeling unimportant is the most depth we have ever gotten from her, and because she's always been an ignored character, the moments where she is the focus are more captivating than they ever would have been if she had been developed in the past. But that lack of character exploration does come back to damage a certain scene. The argument between Moxie and Millie is something we all knew would happen one day. You can't have a perfect couple like this be absolutely flawless because that's just poor writing. What is good writing is that even though this moment was built up to in so many fans' minds, the writers don't overdo it by making it an overly dramatic argument that almost ends their relationship and instead is sized down to an argument of much smaller proportion. Even though they are angry at each other for the moment, Moxie and Millie just love each other too much to have a petty argument spiral into a near relationship ending one, so once again I give the writing team my regards. Unfortunately, what kept this scene from being a truly impactful moment is that I found myself not being captivated by this argument as much as I would have, because Millie's admittance of feeling unimportant feels like it came out of nowhere. There was never a moment in the show where it was hinted that she felt this way, so this insecurity of hers feels like it was only written into the scene to make Moxie more of a bad guy in this argument, which again feels like an all too familiar trope as we have seen with Stella and Stolas' relationship. In my headcanon, this scene and Millie feeling like an unimportant person in this story is a meta nod to the fanbase over how underdeveloped this character has been, but I know that's just wishful thinking. Now I know humor is subjective, but that's not going to stop me from declaring that this episode has the best humor in all of season 2. In place of unnecessary swearing and poorly timed sex jokes, we get some pretty hilarious character reactions, my favorite being Millie's reaction to Moxie leading the job. I don't know why I love this joke so much, it's such a simple moment, but the line delivery and the well-timed pause just made me laugh so much harder than I should have. This episode also has a Liam Vickers style visual gag where the subtitles of a song Moxie sings begin to criticize him, and it's a much appreciated deviation from the comedic formula the show usually has. And lastly, the joke that set off the fanbase's moral superiority complex. There is a scene where Barbie seduces a camp counselor, and the scene itself is entertaining enough, but the idea of an imp that's probably older than this kid doing this act upset a lot of people, and yeah, it's bad, but isn't that the point? When Moxie is tasked with murdering this kid, no one bats an eye, but when Barbie flashes the same kid, that's somehow worse? These entities are literally born and raised in hell. Every single character in this show are not supposed to be people we aspire to be like or 100% emphasize with. Does anyone remember when in the pilot Blitz murders and dismembers a kid? It just bothers me that the fanbase who watched this adult cartoon
in the walls. Oh, that's fucking hilarious.
Thinks edgy translates to gratuitous swearing, over-the-top violence, and flippantly acknowledging sex as something that exists. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't edgy supposed to mean provocative and treading on the edge of being offensive? This is why shows that really do want to be edgy can never be edgy, because whenever they are edgy, the supposed adult audience begins to cry over something being considered too far for them to continue being comfortable. I could make an entire video on this, but I am here to review this episode, not criticize the fanbase, so I'll leave it at this. This show has people from hell. People in hell do bad things. Therefore, you should expect them to do bad things. In conclusion, the humor in this episode is refreshing beyond belief, with just the scenes I talked about, but there are so many smaller jokes that make it so much better, with Moxie and Millie cross-dressing for seemingly no reason at all, Moxie's very intimate relationship with Starks continuing where it last left off back in episode 5, and the continuous torture of this small child that feels reminiscent of the early Helva Boss episodes. Now I know what you're thinking by now. Wait, did Vanity Moth get paid off by Vivian or something? He's barely criticized the episode. Well, don't worry, we are at that point, and there are glaring issues with this episode that have been present throughout this entire season.
You three have been screwing around on Earth this whole fucking time without human disguises?
The fuck is wrong with your leg?
Oh no.
Look, I'm hard on you because I know what you're capable of, Mox. You care too much about what everyone thinks, except for me, because, you know, my opinion is correct, but just keep doing a good job.
Oh god, it's...
This is why I don't trust you with dick, Mox.
Really, sir?
No, not really. You're a fucking disgrace.
It's still inconsistent. Ugh.
Satan fucking dick!
I swear, someone on the writing team must have been booped with a dumbstick, because the inconsistency in season 2 is starting to get uncanny. What happened to Moxie and Blitz's development? I expected Blitz to continue being kind of mean, but to the point of calling Moxie a disgrace? And for Moxie to be genuinely disappointed afterwards? I remember when I first saw that bonding scene in Truth Seekers, I knew it was too early to complete that arc, and now the repercussions of that have come back in full swing. The scene where Blitz calls Moxie a disgrace is hilarious, and maybe even one of my favorite moments in the show. But for such an esteemed episode like Truth Seekers to have the grand development that the entire episode led up to be ignored is just inexcusable. And Vivian might as well just make a Twitter post admitting that the human disguises were just made for fan art and merch. You can make an excuse for the humans by making them drunk or thinking they're wearing a costume since they are in LA, but this episode isn't going to convince me. Not because of Mox and Millie's disguises, but because of Blitz and Barbie. This camp counselor is literally watching his partner talking to an undisguised Blitz, and watches as Barbie transforms from human to imp, and what is his reaction? Oh, that's right, he doesn't have one. Not a single line of dialogue, or him screaming in horror or asking what they are. Nothing? Really? Anyways, there's also a scene where we get to see the only payoff to Blitz's scenes in the middle of the episode, where we see him force someone to use an Asmodean crystal to get to Earth, and it seems apparent that Blitz knows what they do, so why exactly did he ever need Stolas' book if he knew these existed? Maybe they are really expensive, but this is Blitz. Couldn't he just kill someone and take theirs? His entire business is killing people, so wouldn't it be in character for him to track down and kill someone who has it, instead of sleeping with Stolas? Speaking of inconsistencies with characters, I'm having a very hard time believing that Moxie had any trouble subduing a recovering drug addict when he was trying to kill his target, when in just the previous episode we saw him take on 3 guys at the same time who all probably have twice the amount of body weight as Barbie does, and he comes out of it completely unscathed. You can call these criticisms nitpicks if you want. Admittedly, only a few of those inconsistencies actually bothered me while I watched the episode for the first time, but if you choose to remember that the previous episodes exist, these moments really stick out. So yeah, that's all I have to say about Unhappy Campers. And even though it doesn't seem like much of the fan base liked the episode, I have no problem being the guy who didn't like, but loved this episode. Moxie and Millie were great, with the audience getting to see new sides to both of them. Blitz was neither good nor bad, and Barbie was complete wasted potential. The humor wasn't obnoxious and even clever at times, and my biggest gripes with this episode aren't with the episode itself, but how it relates to past episodes. Unhappy Campers is what Hell of a Boss was always supposed to be, a bunch of imps going out to kill someone and running into problems along the way, while the audience learns more and more about the characters as they deal with said problems. This episode feels like a dimension hopped right out of a reality where we got the Hell of a Boss that was pitched to us instead of the insufferable rom-com we are often subjected to. Ozzy's was great, and Queen Bee was slightly above average, but the focus of those episodes were about Blitz and Stolas, not IMP. But this would have been a great finale for Season 1, where we get not only to see Blitz and Millie argue, but also get introduced to Barbie setting up a big player for Season 2. This all being accompanied by an inspirational 80s song to really make the end of Season 1 climactic, makes Unhappy Campers one of the best episodes to date, and a real Hell of a Boss episode that should have been the finale to Season 1.
No statement on the shipping. But I would love to clarify before it gets too out of hand that this character is meant to be 18 or 19.
Yeah. Look at him walking away. Look at him. Hey, that's some bullshit.